But this is why industrial designers need to embrace and understand IoT, because it's coming, well, it's here, and you have to understand it, navigate it, and create better experiences. We're traditionally the people defending the people, the humans, right? Because we don't care too much about the sales figures or how many people buy something. I mean, we want it to be successful, but truly, designers, we're the ones that are trying to make the people have a good experience with the object, with the brand. So it's important that we know how IoT changes that experience and we make it a good one.
Welcome to Design Drives, your audio experience about what, how, and why design drives things forward. A podcast hosted by Sebastian Gier, together with forward-thinking design practitioners from around the world.
In this episode, I talk with Paul Hedge, founder of the Teams Design Studio in the States. We talk about the origin story of the process largening the footprint of the well-known design brand in America 20 years ago, but also touch on the rest of his journey, all the way to his studies, where he studied at the same school than Johnny Ive just a few semesters below him, but also learn about his trip to Germany, knocking at the doors to get an internship abroad at a leading design studio, where we also recognize how much easier it is these days for students. We also learn about the history and difference between US and European design. But it's not just about the past, we also build on that and look into the future. We learn about how UX design has and will continue to influence industrial design, where every designer should know and learn about IoT, the Internet of Things, but we also learn about how AI will change design moving forward. Again, just like previous episodes, this is a collaboration of Design Drives and IDSA, the Industrial Designers Society of America. Enjoy the episode.
Hey Paul, how are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Really excited to interview you and talk with you about design. So it will be really interesting at the beginning to give the audience a little bit of context about your background. Maybe start with the early days, why you went into design in the first place.
Yeah, great place to start, certainly in the time frame. It actually started quite early, I guess. There were certain signs, I guess, certain signs early on, which I didn't realize at the time. Essentially, I did go to art and design college at age 16. I left school early and specialized in art and design. But the background of that was, as a child, I was certainly into art. I was also quite academic at school, so I was into math and physics, and all the other subjects were fine, but I really got my teeth into the art side of things. But in retrospect, in thinking back to what I actually did, in addition to just doing drawing and exploring, sketching and art in various ways, I was also known to my parents as the little inventor. And when I was tiny, I think I wanted to be a mad professor type thing, because I was into these mad inventions, there was something appealing about that. And then what I found myself doing sometimes was I'd wake up in the morning on a weekend, I'm excited with this new idea. I'm going to build an assault course in the backyard. You know, I'm just going to have like rope swings, I'm going to have some nets and stuff like that. So instead of running out there and starting to piece it together, I would then grab a piece of paper and start sketching it out, trying to capture these ideas down on paper. And then as I'm drawing it, and really just for myself at that point, I'm not creating a piece of art, I'm planning it on paper, and then changing it, you know, because I'm seeing the plan and then I'm seeing that this net is not very good, where am I going to get that from, where do I hang it from, and then adjusting it. So what I didn't realize at the time was that I was essentially designing. And at the end of that process of designing the assault course, my energy was already spent. I would move on. I wouldn't then run out and build it. I wouldn't really have the enthusiasm anymore. It kind of peaked already in putting it together. And of course, I was excited about design, but let's go and eat. Let's go do something else new. So I was definitely more on the design invention side of things. The creative process of that design was obviously the appeal of it. And of course, I wanted an assault course or whatever it was I was designing. But I think the true energy and appeal was in the theoretical creation. So these are only things you see afterwards. So I go through design. I think that I'm going to go into graphic design, which then teaches me a little bit more about fine art in this 2-year foundation course, essentially very Bauhaus-like. And so the fine art gets me into sculpture, which gets me into the 3D department. And then I start seeing the people in the second year of that course, they're doing what was called product design. And I saw them there with markers and making prototypes and making things work. And I was instantly attracted to it because I loved the sculpture because it had the creativity and it had the 3 dimensions that fine art didn't have. And so sculpture was incredibly appealing. But then looking at this prototype making and planning, that filled in the gaps for me. It's like practical sculpture. And it appealed to that inventor side of me from earlier on. So there was no going back after that point. Long answer to your short question.
Which school was it then you went to?
So that was a local college, which then gave me a portfolio so I could apply to get into the University of Northumbria, which was a 4-year degree course in the north of England.
In product design?
In product design, yeah. And I was very lucky and very happy to get in there. It was highly competitive to get in there. It's known now as the school where Johnny Ive went. And he was actually just, he was in his final year when I started.
So did you meet him?
Yes. I mean, I didn't know him as such. We were first years, young, naive people looking at those older kids who knew how to do stuff. And he did have a bit of a reputation already at school, which was interesting. The lecturers, the professors had already kind of identified his talent, before he graduated. I think he had gone through internships. And so they were obviously seeing a lot in him, not just him, obviously other people. But it was interesting that over the next couple of years, we kept on hearing about Johnny Ive, or Jonathan Ive, they would call him, because that's his name. And we were almost sick of hearing about this person, who just graduated and got some job at Tangerine, big deal. And we saw his drawings on the wall, and we were not impressed. The professors, the lecturers had spoken to him, knew about the concepts and the depth of thought behind what was represented by that sketch. And that's the difference that he had. And we were too young and naive to understand that. We saw a sketch. At
the quality of the...
And we were just looking at the line work,
and
shading. And it does show you that you've got to be more than line work and shading to go as far as he did. Anyway, Northumbria was great 5 years actually. I took a year out in the middle, extended it even longer.
And then you got also the chance to experience a little bit of international workplaces. So
yes, that's right. One of the appeals of Northumbria is that you do internships, and you have to do internships.
Mandatory.
It's mandatory. And so my first internship was in England, working at a company that designed shop fittings and shop fitting systems. Amazing experience. But then the following year, after a trip that we did abroad to Barcelona, I was inspired for my next internship to be abroad. And at first I thought, I want to go to Barcelona or Spain or somewhere, and started looking into different types of design. How does Spanish design compare to German or French, and what are the differences? And then really got into understanding German design. Obviously, there's a very, very strong heritage of industrial design in Germany. I think it's wrong to call it German design. But it just seemed to fit the way that I saw the design world And so then I started targeting Germany as being a place I could do internships. And I did. It was crazy. I didn't know the language or anything. But I sent applications out to a whole bunch of places under the ruse that I will be in your town of Hanover, Stuttgart, Schwäbisch Gmünd or somewhere in 2 weeks' time. And would it be possible I can come by and just get some advice on my portfolio? The German designers, being as nice as they are, pretty much all responded to me and said, yes, come by. We don't normally allow people at short notice to come by, but seeing as you're coming from England and all that way and you happen to be in town, we'll let you in the door. And so that worked. I got 10 interviews within 10 days, which is crazy. So I got all these responses, and I was hoping for like one or two. That was amazing. So then I planned this trip of zipping up and down Germany within 10 days. There was only one company that actually turned me down, but I was pretty keen on seeing them. So I did turn up at the door as well. It was a company in Schwäbisch Gmünd. And the secretary almost roughly tackled me as I was walking in. I just rang the bell. She came. The designer answered the door. I'm standing there with my portfolio, and he saw me. He's like,
physical portfolio back then, right?
Yeah, physical portfolio back then. That's right. And he saw me with this, and he was like, come in. You must be here for an interview. Yeah. So he's taken me up to the meeting room, and the secretary saw me, and she was. She must have spotted that I was English or something. I'm sure I stuck out. And she said, no, I told you, you cannot come by like this, unannounced and so on. And then the boss came out. He was like, it's okay. I'll see him. That was me breaking into design. So anyway, it was a cool trip. I'd learned some very basic German along the way, saying things like, I don't speak German, or where's the local train station. And enjoyed every minute of it, and then got an internship and picked up the language.
Was it like A3 physical portfolios back then, right?
Oh, it was bigger. Yeah. My later portfolio went down to A3. Okay. I think it was an A2. My very first portfolio, which had artwork in, was A0. And that's what got me into Northumbria, because to apply for the course, you had to have a pretty good portfolio, physical portfolio. Yeah. Yes, this was the last century that we're talking about. Yeah. And I actually had slides, literally a slide reel. It's these little rotating things with physical slides that you would put in the wrong way around and stuff like this.
To show it on the wall?
Yeah. So you turn up and there would be a projector in the room. You can't imagine this, I know. You've heard stories. Yeah. So it was interesting. This was 1991. And it was at that time when you would have your slides, in a sheet, in like a contact sheet. And then you would potentially have this little rotunda to take with you. Or you'd turn up there and then put the slides into the rotunda of their projector. And then they would project it onto the wall. Or in some cases, people would just hold it up to the light, these tiny little slides. Ridiculous to think about. But really, the art went down to your physical prints. You would get really high-end photography. You would get the original sketches and drawings. So, the quality of that was really important. I think it's interesting now because you get different dimensions coming in. There was a whole different challenge back then to create this visual representation as creative and as original as possible. Now I think we're put into a tight frame. You've got to have a website, and there's almost a standard layout for that. And it's not about being creative about that. It is about the content, but you're able to put video, animation, bring feel through within the images. And there's so many more ways of doing it than you could back then. Yeah, you had to spend much more time on the presentation. Yes. As well, right? And of course,
now you can spend all the time on the content with presentations.
Yes. Yeah. And that was part of the art. The job of the design back then was doing a lot more physical rendering. Yeah. It was only in 95, I think, that which sounds quite early, that I first did digital rendering using a Wacom tablet, which was, physically separate from the screen back then. And that changed everything. It was a whole different thing than getting digital.
Mm-hmm. And now you've, at some point you founded Teams Design in the USA. Maybe you can tell a little bit about the story after your graduation and how did that story happen?
Right. And it's funny, we've gone into let's talk about last century stuff. Yes, after graduation, it was, I'd already made my mind up to go back out to Germany. I really enjoyed the experience. Mm-hmm. Enjoyed the fact that also I was able to be someone who was different. Mm-hmm. The standard and the level of industrial designers in Germany is very, very high. Mm-hmm. And Northumbria was a great school as well. But the general standard in Germany was very high of the graduates. And the graduates were much older as well. Because, in terms of life skills, they'd spent some time. I think you spent some time as well before college, and doing military service or doing voluntary service in hospitals, things like that. And so your average graduate in England was 21, graduating. And in Germany, they would start studying around 21. And so there's me, the 22-year-old, starting up against 27, 28-year-old designers. Mm-hmm. After graduating, I had decided to go to Germany. Again, it was a very high level of design and a mature sensibility to it as well, which obviously some of that comes through the literal maturity of the designers, junior designers. And Teams back then was called Solani Design. Mm-hmm. And once again, I tried to get a string of 10 interviews set up in a similar way to when I did it on my internships. I did have a number of interviews. I remember Phoenix Design and Frog Design were way up on my list. Teams Design might have been third or fourth, because the outside image was not that of Frog Design, which was very famous for industrial design at the time. And Phoenix Design also had wonderful ads in the Form magazine, the German magazine. And so those are the things that appeal to you as a designer, the very glamorous things. But when I went to Teams, I saw what they did and how they went about it. And it really changed it for me quite radically. It went up to number one on my list. And obviously I loved going to Frog and seeing the place in Altensteig and meeting the guys behind Phoenix. But I suddenly saw how productive and the variety of things that they did at Teams and their approach. I mean, they were all about the design, roll up your sleeves and dive in and do it. And there seemed to be a lot more posturing in a lot of other companies and a lot more of kind of a faux glamour side of things. And there's no way back then you could say Teams or Solani Design was glamorous looking from the outside. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. I really liked the people. And so it did come down to a bit of a choice. I did get multiple offers between my interviews, and I chose Teams and started there, and obviously I've not regretted it. Yes. And that's been a long time. Okay. Fast forward a little bit, I was there for about 5 years, and we did a lot of work for the American market back then from Germany, but we didn't have a branch out here. And it was actually Bosch that approached us, Bosch Power Tools, because we were designing and still are all their power tools, and we were their turn-to partner for everything. And they had bought a company over here, Skill, and having some difficulties in their eyes with the transition. They felt that the designs that were happening over here were not Bosch enough. They were too American, which of course was a very German-centric way of looking at it. but what they asked us for was to have teams in America being very hands-on, looking after their design there and not trying to design from Germany. So that's actually what tipped the balance. We were already very interested in the American market because we were designing for it.
Yeah.
And then being here obviously helps a heck of a lot. And so because I was doing a lot of Bosch work, the language and culture background helped. And I believe I was seen as being the right person for the job. I was asked to come out here and set up office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really wondering about how that all happened. Was it like more of a personal drive? Did you say, I want to go to the US? Is there a way of bringing teams design there, or was it more of an external force? So it's very interesting. Why did you choose Chicago?
Well, for a number of reasons, but a very good reason was because Bosch Power Tools was here.
Okay.
But we did weigh up other locations because it was important that we're not reliant on Bosch. Obviously, we'd have to set up and work with a number of different companies anywhere in the US. And Chicago was a very, very good fit. It's second city. It's not New York and it's not LA. And it sort of had the right mentality, the Midwestern mentality that it's associated with the middle band of America is not too different from where Teams is based in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
The Swabian outlook on life. What is it? It's Schaffer, Häuslebau.
The Midwest of Germany.
Right. Yeah. So it seemed like the right approach. It's not all high glam New York. That didn't seem like a good fit for the company as it was then. And generally, the situation looked very good. I love Chicago. It's a great place. It's very metropolitan. Great connections all around the US, and almost all of our clients are outside of Chicago. So it's not as if we're here just for the clients. Mm-hmm. But it's a nice central place.
Mm-hmm. And how about that process of founding Teams Design here and then setting it up and then growing it also over the years? I'm wondering a little bit about that process. Coming from Germany and also being quite young.
Yeah.
I
think I was 12 at the time. Yeah. It was amazing amount of trust that was put upon me to just go out and do it. And in Esslingen, the headquarters, they were just very busy with all the work. And so it was very much just given to me as a project to set it up, do whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. And so prior to coming here, I did internet research, which is amazing for 1998. And obviously found the office. And it was just me coming over, and my first employee was an intern. And soon after that, started hiring full-time staff, one after the other, and we grew quite fast. But yeah, as a personal experience, it was incredible. I'd never been to America before this came up, and so coming here with wide eyes and not really understanding everything. And yes, the language is somewhat different, but the language was not the issue. I think a lot of it was really important to understand the American approach towards design, because if you look at it from the outside, you become quite blinkered. You look through it with a European filter, or a British filter, or a German filter, and you can very easily become quite skeptical or not really see the true idiosyncrasies of how design is done here. And I'm not calling it American design. I don't think that really exists. But there was definitely a different approach here, different expectations. And at the time, products looked very different. The massive products in the consumer side of things, as well as industrial, did look very different from European versions of the same.
Do you still see a big difference, even nowadays, when it comes to the American approach?
Definitely less of a difference. And back then, you could identify it as being, in America, the business success was very important in releasing a product or a line of products. And so there was a lot more research that was done here. So focus groups or user research to see if a new launch of product is going to be accepted by the market or not. And in doing so, if you go into focus groups, you're pulling in people who have had that product. They bought it 5 years ago. It was designed five years before that, based upon a culture that existed probably 5 years before that. So it's very backwards. Their point of reference is very backwards thinking. And so you go into the research and you're asking these people and showing them something new and radical. It's very hard on the spot for that person to say, yes, I love it. And so generally you get very conservative choices. And that, in effect, affected the choice of design that would then be released by companies. So in European eyes, they looked at American products as being very conservative, very small steps. And conversely, Americans looked at European design as being bold and radical, a Lessie or Krups or wherever you're looking. There are some strong firms out there with a big statement. Now, on the business success side of things, in Europe, it was not guaranteed. You launch these products, it's a statement of the company. And in Europe, they did a lot less of those focus groups or user research before launching a product. It's like, well, I don't care what people are going to tell me. We are going to launch this because this is the best product that we can do. Why should we research it? And so it gets launched, it gets sold, and it's either a hit or it's not. It's a risky business. And in the States, it was more of a conservative, safe approach. So those two dynamics, the strategy of the companies, affected the visual impression that you got from products in both areas. The reason I'm explaining that background is that was then. Things changed.
Yeah.
Research has been adopted fully in Europe, in Italy, Germany, England, wherever, getting consumer feedback on things. And vice versa, visual brand language or statement of a company or innovative breakthrough designs, those things have been adopted wholeheartedly in your average American manufacturing brand. I remember again, going back to the last century, I think it was 1997, 98 or something, there was a book called Innovate or Die. And it's crazy to think that was a rallying call, that it was radical to say that you need innovation or your products will die, your company will die if you don't have innovation. These days, it's like everyone knows you need innovation. Everyone's talking innovation. So if you look at that, over those 20 years, there has been that big mental shift, and therefore a greater acceptance in the US towards design strategy, towards innovation, and design's role towards innovation, and tying innovation and design to financial success. And I swear, in the 90s, that was not the talk. When I came here in 98, I started talking to a lot of designers in the community, and a lot of that discussion was about, okay, we designers shouldn't be artists, we should be walking the walk and talking the talk now. We need to act like business people. And there was that transition that happened through the 90s, from being artisans in the corner to now talking the talk that the marketers like. Again, this is old hat, right? I think we've gone through that door and some others in the meantime. But these things affect design. It affects the strategies that we use within design. It's everything. Now, yes, it's a completely different world.
Yeah. What would be your advice to people who want to start their own design studio?
A number of things come to mind when you say that. Yeah. If I think of somebody who is graduating and is a little scared of jumping into some corporate job or a consultancy and they're not sure what they should do or if they should commit. And they are enticed by the thought of now setting up, doing their own thing, maybe doing a Kickstarter or setting up their own design firm. Don't do it. That would be my advice. Don't come straight out of school and do it. It's very, very hard. Yeah. And this is not based upon my experience, because my experience, I had a leg up when I came here, even though it was just me and building a company around that. I was building around something that existed already, a heritage.
Built on an existing framework.
Yeah. And we were not recognized back then, but we had a portfolio to become recognized. More than a graduate just coming out of school. Yeah. So my experience was not as hard as it is for someone setting up their own firm. It's not only is it hard, but it's also you do need a lot more experience to become that company, to become as high as you need to be on the totem pole when you create that company, either as a freelancer or setting up a collaborative company. Yeah. So experience is key. The other thing I'd say that's very important in that situation, even with that experience and a number of years behind your belt, setting up a company, you've got to look at the differentiation. There's lots of design consultants out there, freelancers, who are offering design and wonderful sketches and ergonomics, and the skill set is very high. The competing skill set is out there, and we on the inside can be quite skeptical that company is not as good as us and they're not as good as us. But really, you need a very strong point of differentiation, to the point at which it might be specialization. Mm-hmm. You're going to be known for something. And I think for a company that's starting out, it's hard to commit to that, because you want every job you can do. And you can do medical, you can do furniture, you can do outdoor fishing gear or something. But if people are talking about you, he does design and it's fairly good, right? Compared to, he does outdoor equipment and, he's the turn-to person for that, or he's the turn-to person to do coffee machines. If you have that label, then eventually that work is going to come to you. So the specialism and reputation, obviously the skill set that supports that area, is really going to make a strong business over time. 3, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Whereas if you're a generalist, you're going to be fighting that fight every single year.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And what's interesting also, because, in Chicago, you started out with Bosch and Skill as the first clients, and you had sort of a specialization in ID there, right? But you've been growing with Teams design also to other disciplines, right? Now you do UX design as well and other things. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how did you grow in these other aspects of design?
Yeah, so Bosch obviously was the instigator to bring us over here, but we also had a lot of experience in kitchen and bathroom and other household areas, and also industrial. So even now we do a fair amount of industrial commercial things like forklift trucks or robots and things on that side. Our website might skew towards the more glamorous consumer products. But to your question about the different aspects of ID, such as UX, and I think some of the approaches have grown through time. So again, going back 20 years, industrial design, we saw it as being a larger thing, concept to production data. It was important, that we saw ideas not just being sketches of cool ideas passed over the wall to someone. We're not unique there, I know. But industrial design itself has grown all these peripheral areas now. UX, quite recently, that's come about almost as it is a separate profession. But it was interesting seeing how industrial designers reacted to UX at first. They're like, what is user experience really? We've always been doing that. Why is that different? Yeah. And it was almost shunned at the start. I felt like I was going a little bit against the stream in not being quite so skeptical, because I did get to see, and I feel like I embraced UX processes and methods, because we did user research to find insights about what people wanted. We did user flow. We did journey mapping before UX was invented, right? And to design for the user was not breaking news for us. However, we didn't do it in the strictly collaborative way that UX did it. UX opened the doors and said, okay, we're going to journey map together. We felt we were being collaborative by doing a journey map and now presenting it and explaining it to our client. But that's not truly collaborative. It felt collaborative at the time. But I experienced the difference in actually creating a journey map with a team of interdisciplinary people to see the difference. And the difference affects the entire project moving forward, because now everyone really felt and knew about the steps within that journey map, or whatever it is that we're doing. So we did workshops before, but workshops are different now. So we have adjusted as a company. We embraced it quite some time ago, but I did see a lot of skepticism in the industrial design community towards UX. Or there's the UX side of research as well. It's interesting that the term is used for so many different things.
Yes.
It feels like it's still early days. But the processes, if you go back to the processes and the adaptation, the easy adaptation of things like agile process within UX or design thinking within UX, I think it's a very useful additional perspective to have as a designer. You list these activities under UX, it's like, yeah, done that, can do it. But it's a different perspective. And again, it comes down to that collaborative nature. And the cool thing I noticed quite early on as well is that UX is suddenly accepted as by our clients as being something that they should be doing, and therefore they will participate. We'll do a UX workshop with them. We'll do journey mapping with them as part of UX, and it's completely accepted. We've always wanted that. We didn't truly do it because the engineers, the marketers didn't feel it's their responsibility to be part of that. The old game was we deliver those things. We tell them about what the user wants, and we defend that. But now it's everyone's responsibility under this new game called UX. And now the marketers and engineers and everyone involved is equally concerned about the user experience. And that is a revelation. It's excellent.
Do you think it's because of the terminology? Because it's a different word? It's easier to grasp for people, the value?
I think so. And it could have been a different term. So it's not necessarily the nomenclature, but the fact that there is a term and that it is a thing that is associated with better design, better development. And I think particularly at a corporate level, it's very important to adapt to tried and true processes. It's not about reinventing a process that you don't know will result in success. And so if you do this process, if you go through these steps, the general belief is that at the end of it, you have a product or service that checks all the boxes, and therefore this should be good. Now, it's not to say that, the product or service truly is good because you went through all the processes, but it does give you a certain safety net. And it's very hard with any product or service at the end of a project to truly prove, to say, yes, this is the best it could be under the timing with the people that we had. But if you have a process and you did it and it felt right, then everyone has confidence that that end result is correct. Right or wrong, that's the dynamic that happens.
So we talked a little bit about UX as one of the big influences in industrial design the last years. What are also things that changed industrial design over the last years?
So prior to that, I think there was the industrial design, as I said, through the 90s. It seemed, in the US at least, there seemed to be this, we're not artisans now, we're business people. Let's do the marketing talk. And so a lot of discussion then was about research. Insights research was becoming more and more popular, more important and embraced by industrial designers. Again, that was part of talking the talk and understanding what the marketers want from things. The next level, I think, is where technology kicks in. And so with industrial design, you get new technology and new tools that led to the maker movement, which we don't talk about quite so much now. But the maker movement was also emancipated, I guess, through the ability to quickly mock things up, to prototype, Arduino, 3D printers. You've got all these new tools that help you prototype, help you go online, get feedback, SurveyMonkey. So one person now can come up with an idea and make it almost manufacturable, test it, and compete against the big guys, right? So the maker movement, I think, in the background of ID, definitely had an influence because it helped purvey a lot of these tools that they were using and make it more mainstream, make things like 3D printing cool. And then the combination of makers and then Kickstarter also really embedded a new spirit for industrial designers. And so suddenly we felt that industrial designers, we almost had everything it takes to create our own business instead of designing for someone else's brand, someone else's business. And so it's very tempting to suddenly do your own Kickstarters, like everyone was doing it. And it has then, instead of walking the walk in terms of how do I now communicate better with marketers at a company, the attention was, how do I now create my own business? And it goes beyond the design of an object and the prototyping, but how do I now source where I can make that? How do I choose between materials? How do I go from short batch production into mass production? How do I now market it if I'm not reliant on Kickstarter, or what happens after Kickstarter? So designers are suddenly involved in a whole different discussion that has affected industrial design, because now we're looking at the big picture, the ecosystem of a product or service, beyond it being a sexy looking sketch. So on one side you could say, well, that's taken away from one side of our craft, because now we're spending more time looking at the business side of things and less time improving our sketching, model making, rendering craft. But it's an important trade-off. I think it's very important for today's industrial designers to have a good sense of that side of business.
And where do you see this going in terms of the future of industrial design? How do you see these things evolving?
I do see that continuing. I mean, it's not about, the future is not about Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
That changed things, but what it did was it just created more attention to how businesses and a product business can work. And it also meant that a small brand can compete against the big ones. So it kind of opened up the door for possibilities. Go back to technology as being the change amplifier. Sorry, I'm very much involved in IoT, the Internet of Things, and that is now getting coupled very fast with AI. And I think those are two huge outside influences that will change our profession. I jumped into IoT a few years ago to get a good understanding of it. here at Teams, we were already doing for our clients a fair amount of IoT-related work. Some of it was dealing with embedded systems that would now connect to a database, and then that database would feed to a web page somewhere or a back-end portal. And so we kind of came out from the physical world. We started hiring our UI staff 10 years ago, but then the physical and the digital world very quickly overlapped. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you get to IoT very fast, because anything electronic is now going to be connected, or it's just a dumb object. And therefore, we need to think of these experiences as being more holistic. Mm-hmm. Not the first to say that, but it is something that changed us as a company. 6-7 years ago, we had a big global meeting, a summit of all our 5 branches. The heads came together. We talked about those changes. How much do we morph what we consider industrial design to embrace UI, what was almost called UX back then, but the things that were already happening. It wasn't known as IoT back then, but we were already doing a lot of embedded software work. And then later on, of course, we're working with Bosch, with various companies understanding their approach to IoT. So, in doing so, we've also got some background knowledge of IoT on an individual product basis, but also on a strategy basis, talking with a lot of companies in their adapting IoT as a whole, not just on one product. And that's the best way that a company can go about it. The worst way is to look at it myopically just within one product. This product has an app and it connects to a database somehow. It's a big commitment for a company, and the company needs to look company-wide, product-wide. Why are we going to IoT? It's a big effort. What do we get from it? And yes, why are we doing this? And I think a lot of companies have felt they got forced into it, didn't really have a strategy or a plan. And so what we're doing at Teams now is we seem to be that voice of reason. We have some of our clients turning to us and asking those questions about, well, you know, if we did start doing IoT now, how would we do that? And so we're able now to talk about, well, okay, this is the sort of strategy you could have. We're no experts, but we have the experience that we're able to share and also to show some of the many, many pitfalls of companies going down the wrong paths.
And it also makes sense, I assume, to do it all together, right? Because, I mean, if you just hire it for the ID and, you know, if it's an IoT product and you can't think about it as a touch points, right. Then I think it will be hard to have that much of an impact or really think these things together, right? Yes. So I see there also IoT as a gateway, I think, for industrial design to be in a conversation with other design disciplines, being connected with other design disciplines.
Yes, it's very true. And understanding what the basics of IoT items are, or that connected product is in the ecosystem, I'd say is absolutely mandatory for industrial designs now. What's a database mean? How do we user test things? What is this experience that we talk about? So we as a company, we're traditionally an industrial design company. We are now an experience design company, because a lot of what we're designing is more than just that traditional physical product. And the experience comes from a combination of strategy and research. And so the turning of those ideas and concepts into reality is also a major part of what we do. But the experience is in the center of it all. Call it UX. UX, I think, gets put into a little box. We use the term experience more broadly, because when it comes to IoT, why should we be looking at IoT? Because we are designing the experience, right? And it doesn't matter if it's on the physical or on the digital, or the intangible, or on the back end, or the influencers, or the people who somehow surround this product in some way. The experience has been obviously recognized as being a valuable aspect, a financially valuable aspect for companies. They know they need it. However, companies also know they need IoT. And something we see companies doing is step number one, okay, IoT, it's very technical. Let us ask our IT experts, our IT department, the guys that have been, setting up your printer to your laptop for years. Now, they do know their technical stuff, right? I'm not undermining the IT department whatsoever, but their world, their Weltblick, is coming from a technical basis. Okay, we need these sensors, we need this form of communication and these protocols, and this sort of database. Whereas really, when you're designing an IoT experience, right, product or service, you got to start with that user. Because if you're collecting data, you want that data to be good data. So let's have a look at the experience that person's having with the object, and therefore that data is going to be better. Mm-hmm. So should the IT person be designing the experience or the designer, right? Obviously I'm flying our flag on that one. But this is why industrial designers need to embrace and understand IoT, because it's coming, well, it's here, and you have to understand it, navigate it, and create better experiences. We're traditionally the people defending the people, the humans, right? Because we don't care too much about the sales figures or how many people buy something. I mean, we want it to be successful, but truly, designers, we're the ones that are trying to make the people have a good experience with the object, with the brand. So it's important that we know how IoT changes that experience and we make it a good one.
Mm-hmm. So that's definitely a recommendation for also students, right, to or everyone in design to adapt this topic.
Right, even old people like me. I mean, embrace it. It is complicated. Yeah. The further you go down that path, it reminded me as I was going down that path myself. It reminded me of the sustainability topic.
Interesting.
Sustainability in terms of design. Yeah. On the outside, it seems simple. It's like, oh yes, let's use green materials instead of less good materials. But then you start questioning, and the more you know, the more complex it gets. It's not as simple as switching out materials. There are 64 other ways of approaching sustainability when it comes to products, beyond just switching out materials. And so I think it's the same with IoT. The more you know, the more complex it gets. But we've got to do this because our job is to defend the humans from the people with the technology and the people who want money, right? Nothing against IT people, but we're the ones in charge of experience now, so we should understand our craft.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any negative trends or topics that worry you when it comes to design, looking into the future, or also something you notice at the moment?
Yeah, sort of a big one there is AI. It's as exciting to me as it is troublesome, more so than IoT. IoT without AI, I think in 5 years' time, we're not going to think of IoT and AI as have ever been separate. How or why did we collect masses of data and then try and slice it and understand it without AI is the way we're going to see it. So with that in mind, how is AI going to change what we do? It's affecting engineering in many ways, as is well known, with iterative design, interestingly. It's also helping us with very, very complex amounts of data. And so we're talking about IoT, collecting data. So how do I now use that data to understand something like the human experience with the product? Well, AI is going to be excellent for us designers. At the same time, it's also scary and the fact that a lot of AI can be, when it's most effective, we don't truly know how it's working. And we are heading towards those scary scenarios. We've seen so many sci-fi movies, right, to know that we're heading towards that thing, towards that entity that is obviously more clever than us. All the pieces are in place. We have nanotechnology that's creating supercomputers that can calculate incredibly fast. You apply AI there, and you connect all of human consciousness, i.e. the internet, to it. How could this possibly go wrong? So again, I think we designers who have a little bit of influence on this subject matter, we should understand the consequences of what we're doing and speak up when things might be heading the wrong direction. I don't think we're going to be the ones who are there at the right time to avoid the ultimate disaster, whatever that is, from whichever sci-fi movie you choose. But in the meantime, our job is to help steer culture and understanding and people's expectations and approaches towards technology, right? We want people to understand technology. We want it to be intuitive. We want it to be in a way that people embrace. And I think that's our role. Because if people shun technology, technology is still going to advance by itself. It doesn't matter what we do to it. So I'd rather that people understand it, embrace it, and therefore we have the mass with us to be able to resist whatever bad technology comes our way.
There's also a lot of talk about embracing AI, right, as a designer, and looking into, how can this be part of the design process. We were talking a little bit now also about the end scenarios and how this will all go. But in terms of the things that might change for design as a discipline going forward, how do you see that topic of embracing design and the design process? Which parts of the design process will still be important, while maybe other parts maybe the AI will do most of it?
Yeah, I think where we're seeing AI surprisingly come in first within design is the iterative, creative side of things. And so very quickly, AI can look at the approaches that have happened in the past and then use the knowledge of the best engineer possible and now look at, okay, these 20 different ways, like design thinking, these 20 different ways are 20 different approaches to solve the problem that you just told me about. What it's not doing, though, is coming up with the question or the strategy. So I think as the waters are rising, at the bottom, you've got styling iterations based upon trends, right? AI very good at, or becoming very good at visual recognition of trends, and will become better than us. Designers, we soak that in on an everyday, right? And we get a gut feel. I believe AI is going to catch up pretty good and be more accurate, right? Doesn't mean it's going to have that artistic side of things necessarily. Anyway, that's at the bottom end of things. But the strategic approach and our understanding of other humans and our nuances and our gut feel are the things that we're going to keep. And so I think as an industrial designer, yes, we do need to think broadly. We need to be the people who are inputting the question and are in charge of the question.
You also need to steer the process. Right?
Steer the process, yes. Yeah. And AI is great at finding the answer. And a favorite book of mine and many designers is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a series of books. And there, I was reminded the other day of, there was a fictional computer that was created over a period of 5,000 years or something on this special planet. And the computer was called Deep Thought, I think it was. And so they finally finished this computer. It was the best thing that anyone in the universe could make. And they approached them and asked them the question, what is the meaning of life? And then Deep Thought said, yes, I'm going to need to think about this. How long do you need? 5,000 years. And they come back and it answers, after all this time, the whole universe is watching, 42, right? So it's quite a famous question and answer set in that book. But we are at that point where understanding the question is more important than the answer. And it's our role to understand the implications of any questions we put into AI, because it knows way beyond what we can know. It can iterate beyond any designer, dare I say. It can be creative in a way that traditional computer thinking couldn't be. But it's not in charge of our destiny in the way that we are.
Would you actually say that if you look at the design process, the last part, say like the last 50%, are maybe more in danger when it comes to AI? Or?
Yes. I feel the real AI breakthrough, and there'll be a lot of practice of the complete process. I think as it comes into industrial design as an activity, it will be the one that goes from research, right, taking its big brain and using it, through iteration and through development. And I'd like to think of it in the way that you described, that the engineering portion turning to production, which seems more rational, could easily be turned over to AI. But I think the front end can as well. It's just not necessarily going to have the richness or necessarily the strategy behind it. So if I want to now create a product, I need to get AI to create the product for me. I need to now make certain decisions as to who it's for and how it's going to be, what sort of timeline, what sort of volumes, the sort of things that we would look at as a briefing in design now. I believe the system will be able to take things forward. Our role in this is doing the same process, but a qualitative version of it. So I think we're still going from A to Z, and we will use these tools at multiple times during the process. There can be the A to Z by itself, or we use it all the way through. Just like CAD in a sense, we use it as an assistant. We use digital rendering at the start. We use various digital methods to help compile research. We use basic CAD. We use digital 3D printing, and also we digitally create the tooling. But it doesn't mean that we don't have a role in the process, even though it seems that computers are doing all the steps. So AI could do A to Z, but I think its best role, in my optimism, is that it's our partner in the process. And it'll be a good one too.
Yeah. All right, I think we need to wrap this up. Thank you so much. Amazing insights. Thank you so much.
Fascinating talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was the episode. If you want to give us feedback on the podcast, have something to contribute to the next episode, or just want to get in touch, feel free to connect with us either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram messages, or simply via the designdrives.org website. We love to hear from you.